thanks for joining us. We
You
saw
bet.
you recently over in Saudi Arabia. Want to get your thoughts on that whole setup, the whole spectacle, and let alone Francis's performance over
Well,
there.
man, I got involved in this sport in 1997. I've been to a lot of fight shows, boxing and MMA, and I think to date, probably the biggest, most spectacular fight show I'd ever been to was one of the Prides in Satayama Super Arena. I was cornering Dan Henderson. They had a huge big screen with a waterfall that came over the big screen and these Japanese drummers and this crazy spectacle of a show. It was probably the best show I think I'd ever seen. It was like, wow, until last Saturday. And that setup from start to finish, and I think some of the best boxers, certainly in the last 30 years, were all there. It was truly remarkable. The undercard all took place outside in a beautiful setup. The weather was amazing in the 70s. It was wonderful. A lot of knockouts, a lot of great fights, street title fights on the undercard. And then we move indoors. I'm like, where are we going? What the heck? Why would we do this out here? This is cool. Until you walk into this brand new arena they built in 3 months for this event. We're sitting in the front row. They're like, hey, this stage is actually going to move. And when it moves, you might want to watch your feet. I'm like, you guys have tested this, right? But it was insane. At first, you're like, am I at a concert or am I at a fight? It was remarkable. The setup, the light show, the drop screens, the big screen with Francis and Fury's face all over them, the pyro. I mean, it was spectacular. And then the stage moves and the ring comes up out of the ground, and we're just like, what the heck? This is unbelievable. Michael Buffer was really funny. He's like, man, I hope you don't expect me to be in that ring when that thing comes up. It was a great show. They did a spectacular job of putting it all together. I felt very welcome with all the boxers. They embraced, there was 6 of us from MMA over there, and they embraced us in amazing fashion. Took us in as part of the brotherhood, if you will. Yeah, it was just a great event. Really, really spectacular.
So you mentioned that, it has to be kind of maybe surreal. Did you get ever starstruck at a moment when you're looking around and seeing the boxing legends all around you?
It was just really, really cool. I don't know that I was starstruck, but just to see all those faces, all those people. I grew up watching boxing, and then many of those guys came from that golden era of boxing, and Duran, and I mean right on down the line. It was a who's who from the boxing world for sure, and yeah, from start to finish, just an amazing experience.
We'll talk about just the fight itself. How did you score it at the end?
Well, I had Francis winning, but obviously I'm a little biased. Francis trains in here. He does his MMA training in here. We've watched his progression since he's come here, 4 years ago, and it's been amazing to see the diligence, the work ethic, all the things that he brings to this. That humbleness, and willingness to put himself out there in some uncomfortable places to get better, all in the name of trying to be the best. And look where he's at. I obviously thought he did enough to win that fight. He landed the most power shots. He was the aggressor for a lot of those rounds. I think he got a little tired in the 6th, 7th, and 8th, but came back strong in the 9th and 10th round, and obviously the 3rd round knockdown, I think shocked everybody. I think everybody jumped to their feet and didn't sit back down for quite a while after that. So it was a great performance by him. A split decision, honestly, either way is a win, certainly for MMA, for the PFL, and for Francis. So he shocked the world on Saturday night.
Did you get a chance to talk with him afterwards? And if you did, what sort of things did you say to him?
Yeah, I didn't get near him. There was, you can imagine the mob scene after all of that. So I haven't had a chance to see him or talk to him since all that went down.
We've seen crossover fights that happened before that didn't happen so well, and then we see Francis go out there and put on such a good sport. Do you think that now we're going to see more of these crossover fights because we've seen now an MMA guy represent the, MMA well?
Yeah, I think the door's opened. Obviously, Jake Paul opened that door a while back. The only guy that's come the other way has been James Toney in 2008, and as a top-level boxer trying his hand at MMA. So I'm anxious to see if we get another top-level boxer that wants to try his hand in the smart cage, make his way in there. I think you give them the time to get their feet under them, learn the other things, just like Francis has been doing for the last 3 or 4 years, learning that part of the game. And I think that's what James didn't spend enough time doing, is learning some MMA. It's a different, they're apples and oranges in many, many ways.
Jumping back to MMA and Xtreme Couture specifically, now you guys have another new champion here in town. tell us about your thoughts on Strickland, his performance, and just what that does to the gym overall, the whole culture here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when I retired, the gym went through a little bit of a lull. Guys scattered to the wind. Bringing Dennis Davis in, getting him established as a new coach. Robert Follis helped him do that for a long time. Eric Nixick coming on as a manager, signing the gym over to Ryan, my son, and letting him kind of run the show here. All those things have kind of rallied into what's going on in the gym and this gym environment right now. Those guys have just done an amazing job. And Sean, Francis, Misha, there's so many amazing athletes in here. And Sean had a near flawless performance in that fight, honestly. And a lot like Francis, I don't think anybody gave him a chance. They thought he was going to get his butt whooped. And he just stuck to it, stuck to the game plan, had confidence in the plan, and made it happen. So very, very happy for him. He's a great guy, gregarious personality that a lot of people, some don't like him, some, a lot of people do. So that, those polarizing figures are sometimes fun, the funnest to get behind and to watch.
And last for me, I guess, just any updates on the Xtreme Couture GI Foundations, anything that you guys are working on, any upcoming dates that we should pay?
Yeah, we have Operation Knockout. It's our 12th year doing the fights with Tough Enough, the amateur. We mix in some grappling matches. That's coming up on the 11th here at the Sahara. It's going to be a very good one. We have a lot of great athletes that step up and lend their talent and their time to the cause, which is raising money and awareness for some of our wounded combat veterans. I've got my second annual motorcycle poker run coming up on the 18th down at Space Coast in Cocoa Beach, Florida. Dave Mancuso stepped up and wanted to organize that. That's where he grew up. He lives here in Vegas, and he's been coming to my rides for years here in Vegas, and just said, man, we need to do one of these where I grew up. And so this is our second year doing that down there, and I think it's just going to continue to get bigger down there. They really stepped up and embraced us, and I think the foundation's doing very, very well.
Hi, Randy. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the potential sale between PFL and Bellator. Right now, I guess we were updated that it's not quite done yet, but what would that mean for MMA as a whole and for PFL?
Well, I mean, there's an upside and a downside to almost everything. Obviously my son spent most of his career fighting for Bellator, and Scott Coker's a great guy. He's one of those handshake guys I have a lot of respect for. He's been a lifelong martial artist, and I think the martial artists, the fighters, recognize that in him and that spirit that he carries around just like we do. At first, it was scratching my head. It's like, this doesn't make sense. We have a completely different format. How does this work? But if you look at their marquee names, the fighters that they have on their roster, especially those champions that will be absorbed into the PFL, they fit right into the pay-per-view model, which is going to launch next year. So that part makes sense to me. Now you look at the regional promotions that we started with the PFL Europe. PFL Europe is up and running. A bunch of those fighters on that roster come from the European theater as well. So they'll plug right into that feeder program in PFL Europe. We have PFL Middle East and PFL Africa coming on next year as well. There's a bunch of those fighters from those regions as well. So, although there's 250 fighters on that roster, and I hate to see any of the fighters get cut and not have a place to go fight, we'll see how many of them actually fit into the PFL model and the regional promotions, the global promotion, and then obviously the pay-per-view promotion launching next year as well. I think there's plenty of room for all of them. And how that all shakes out is really the question. Those commentators like Big John and some, I hate to see those guys out of work. They're friends. They're people I respect. I know they'll find their place, and it'll all work out.
How exciting would it be to have Bellator champions versus PFL champions on one super fight card?
I think it would be amazing. I think it's one of those things that hasn't really happened. Obviously we were trying to facilitate, myself and Fedor Emelianenko, Pride versus the UFC back in the day, and there was just no way to make that work. I think the PFL has an open mind about a lot of that stuff and is willing. Look what they're doing with Francis right now and allowing him to box, and not only allowing him, but facilitating him being able to pursue that dream and get that exposure and get out there in the boxing world. So I think they just have an open mind and an open heart about doing what's best for the athletes at the end of the day.
And is there anybody on this PFL finals card that you're most excited to see?
Man, there's so many good fights. I get excited every time I see Collard step out there. I mean, he's just a remarkable man. And all the things that he's been through in the last few seasons, to see him finally in the finals. Goltsov's another one that we've expected to be there and just hasn't put it all together to be there yet. I think those two fights are going to be amazing. Magomed Kirimov against Sadabu in the rematch is going to be really, really interesting as well. Obviously, we have a vested interest in Sadabu and his improvements and all the things that he's done in the last couple of years since he's been doing his camps here. So those are all amazing fights. The fact that Ray Cooper's back on the card, I'm excited to see him. I hope he's back in form and ready to go. And when he stomps out of that tunnel, man, I don't know anybody in the arena that's not going to be excited to see that fight.
Can you talk about how your thoughts on just the season as a whole, how the season kind of started rocky, you lost champions due to suspensions, but the fights got better as the season went on, and now the finals it's kind of just a stacked card. Like, can you talk about, stepping back and be like, oh no, like what, is this season doomed? Like what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, those shows, the 3 shows we did here in Vegas were great shows. There were some great fights on those cards, very exciting, and I thought the season was off and running. And obviously to have the tests go the way they did, that certainly didn't sit well. Something stunk to me, and that's just my opinion. How many seasons have we done now, not had a single positive test, and then we come to Vegas for 3 shows and we have 10? That something's not quite right there, in my opinion. But who knows? So, and Dana's comment about that was telling in my mind too. Oh, I bet they don't come back to Vegas. So who knows? But yeah, it's unfortunate. And obviously we pivoted. We plugged in some holes. It's been an amazing season. The Challenger Series, I mean, can we talk about that? The level of competition that's coming out of the Challenger Series is remarkable. And we've seen that for a couple seasons now. There's some very, very, look at Jose Pinedo. I mean, for crying out loud. Leal. I mean, those guys come out of the Challenger Series and show that they deserve to be in this league and have performed. It's been great. So, yeah, ups and downs. Welcome to the fight game.
Right, exactly. And then finally, just how happy were you to see Francis succeed? Like, he went out and left the promotion that he was with forever, and everybody was just talking shit, right? And he goes out and banks on himself, and then he gets this fight and beats Tyson Fury. Like, how happy were you to see someone succeed in that? Because it usually does not happen that way.
Yeah, no, it was an amazing night for sure. Very proud of Francis. Sitting next to Adesanya, who was, literally in a fervor with all of that, and Dos Santos, and we were all sitting together watching this whole thing unfold. It was really, really amazing, and just happy to be part of that journey with him and watch all that go. Obviously there's an underlying battle there that I've been involved with these contracts and the crappy way that fighters are treated in our sport, the lack of transparency in our sport. I've been fighting that since '06, and even before that, if you go all the way back. And so for Francis to step up, for Jake Paul to be poking and shining a light on some of the issues and growing pains that we have in our sport, I think all that stuff's great, and we need to continue that. And we need organizations that have an open mind and an open heart like the PFL to continue to flourish as well.
Randy, you mentioned the success with the Challenger Series there. I mean, the big storyline is Impa Kasanganay. He fought at the beginning of the year, the Challenger Series. He showed up to Vegas as just a showcase fight. He showed up mid-season, and now he's in the finals. Can you touch up a bit on his story and how it's cool to see him?
Yeah, what an incredible guy. I mean, we have so many of these very interesting stories. We talked about Clay Collard and all the things that he's been through in the last 4 seasons. Impa's another guy, living in a yurt in Florida, and just his journey to get where he's at, and just the humbleness that he brings to life, and that he is a unique spirituality that you see every time he steps in that cage. And man, it's just really unique. And those are the guys you want to get behind. Those are the guys you want to root for. They're great guys, and they're representing our sport in a very positive way. And like, it's not tough enough to fight 4 times in 8 months. How about add a couple fights to that list in 1 season? It's a lot, and he's just embraced it and done a great job.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great story. I mean, another great story I'd say is the year Coach Eric Nixick's having. Can you talk about that? I mean, do you think it will?
Yeah, well, and Eric just has this unique rapport with all these athletes. Coaching is a tough gig. You have to give and give and give and give a lot. and you get a lot of, you don't get a lot of thanks. You don't get a lot of pats on the back. So happy to see Eric getting the accolades and the recognition that he deserves for all the things that he does for these guys in this facility on a daily basis. So that it's just been really, really cool to see him come into his own. Here's a guy that came from the football world, was coached by his father, learned a ton from his mentor, his dad, and now he translates all that to these guys. Emotionally, psychologically, gets them dialed in, not just technically and physically, but all the facets of the sport. He understands how they fit together, and that's what I think comes out.
Hey, when we think about what Sean Strickland did to win the championship when he was considered such an underdog, and then what Francis Ngannou did when the boxing community, me included, a couple of both sports, didn't give him any shot really and thought he was going to get embarrassed. What does that say about the caliber of coaching in this facility to be able to pull off performances and results like that?
Yeah, I just think we've created a unique environment where these athletes can, our motto is check your ego at the door. It's only going to get in the way. And these guys do that. We have an amazing staff, an amazing group of guys. It's a family in here. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. That's exactly what we do in here every single day. And I think that shows. We don't just focus on the physical skills that we develop and coming up with game plans and all that, but dialing in the psychological skills, the mental skills it takes to deal with the adversity of fighting is all part of the package here at Xtreme Couture. Eric, Ryan, Dennis Davis, the staff here, and Gil Gordato right on down the line, they've all either been fighters and understand what it's all about, or they Nate, I mean, there's just so many guys in here that throw it all out there and are willing to give until sometimes it hurts.
Kenny asked you about the boxing legends that were around last weekend. Did you make any friends in boxing that weekend? Did you hang out with any?
Oh man, hanging out with Roy Jones and Slim and having Duran photo bomb me and jump into one of my videos. It was surreal. It was a really, really fun experience. Michael Spinks, at the big dinner, sitting with Michael Spinks and it was just almost surreal hanging out with all those guys and the warmness that they embraced us with was really cool. It was great.
We had Ray Seppo in here earlier and asked him, how likely we could see a super fight pay-per-view headliner with Kayla Harrison and Chris Cyborg should the acquisition of Bellator go through. If that was available in 2024, there's rumours of a two-fight deal with Deontay Wilder and Francis Ngannou, maybe having one of those in the PFL Smart Cage. Considering all of the possible options that could be available to PFL, what's the one super fight you'd like to see?
I think Kayla and Cyborg is one that everybody's talked about for a while now, and that would be an amazing fight, honestly. And to have witnessed Kayla's journey, from just being a judoka, arguably the best judoka we've ever produced, but her transition and her willingness to put herself out there in some uncomfortable spots and answer all the questions and progress as fast as she has to the athlete that she is. I think Cyborg would be an amazing test for her. And I know that she's chomping at the bit to get back in there, and I'm excited to see her back on the card against Julia Budd in the finals. I know she wanted to be in this season, and she wants Pacheco back for sure, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I was very impressed with Deontay Wilder when we interviewed him at the playoffs in New York, and his willingness to genuinely consider stepping in that smart cage and making the transition and trying his hand at MMA is I think, a tribute to the warrior spirit that he's walking around with. He's a formidable athlete. Give him the time to learn some of the MMA that he needs to learn to be able to compete in that smart cage, and I think he's going to do well.
What you mentioned about starting in MMA in the 90s and the 30 years since, it's like the rise of women's MMA and having headliners like Kayla and Chris Cyborg. Is that kind of one of the things that's maybe not taken as a surprise, but is that one of the stories of the 30 years that you've been involved in the sport, seeing the rise of women's MMA?
I think it's important that we embrace having a female counterpart. I think it's something that we needed to do in wrestling for a long time, and now it's a full medal sport. We have over 30 colleges that have collegiate wrestling. Title IX has decimated the Olympic sports for men across the board. Rather than raise funds to create women's opportunities, is what Title IX was supposed to do, they did the easy thing, which is slash men's sports to be in compliance with the gender equity federal legislation. And that wasn't what it was meant to do, was take away men's opportunities. It was meant to create women's opportunities. So having a female counterpart in both the sport of wrestling and the sport of fighting, I think is very, very important. And we need to embrace that, recognize the diligence and the commitment that these ladies have to our sport. A lot of times they're the fight of the night because there's almost another layer of the onion. They have to prove something else, like they deserve to be there. And so they let it go. They're wide open, and I like that. I respect that. So I think we have to embrace that. I think it's important for the longevity of both of our sports.
I think men's heavyweight is quite a unique weight class. I think like a power shot can take you all the way around the world, really. So what advice would you give Deontay, considering he's already got that, he showed that in boxing, what advice would you give, or have you already given Deontay Wilder to kind of, he's not going to be able to master various facets of MMA in a short space of time, but what are the things that he would need to add to his game plan to be...
He's got to start grappling and wrestling. He needs to figure out how to protect himself if he gets taken down. He needs to learn how to sprawl and counter takedowns. It's exactly what Sotobu's been doing, exactly what Francis has been doing. Sotobu for the last 2 years recognized that glaring weakness in his game as a formidable, long, rangy striker. If guys took him down or tied him up, he had trouble there, and that cost him some fights. And I think that's exactly what Deontay needs to be looking at, is immersing himself in an MMA gym somewhere, being willing to take some lumps, get submitted, figure out what this kicking thing and elbows, well, obviously not elbows in the PFL, but still the rules of engagement are completely different to boxing, and that changes the striking. And you have to learn where you're in danger and where you're not, and how to counter and use your hips and your long levers effectively to keep fights standing and make guys box him. That's the key for him. If he can develop some defensive wrestling skills a la Chuck Liddell and make guys stand with him, there's going to be a lot of people that have a big problem.
We saw Holly Holm have, she came to
Holly's a
boxing, but-
perfect example of somebody who's done just that and spent some time developing those tactics and using her wrestling in a defensive manner to make people fight her where she wants to fight.
Thanks, Randy.
You bet.